Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to this month's demonstration of Genealogy Genie AI. Thank you for joining us. As usual, we're going to be doing this demonstration out of our test environment. We like to show you some of the exciting things that we're working on. When I get to the items that are different than what is currently available in the subscriber version, I will mention that. I'll probably repeat it a couple of times just so that anyone who joins will understand that what we're showing you may not be available in the subscriber version. I'm starting off today with a little bit of a diagram, and some of you may have seen this on the invitation to this meeting. And that's because what we've been working on is moving our smart web research. That's our feature that goes out to the internet and actually searches the internet to try to figure out what research is available to help you with your project. Right now, in the subscriber version, we have one AI that basically goes out, develops a plan, and then walks through that plan step by step to collect the information. In the version that we're working on now, we actually have four different AIs, and the plan is an ever evolving plan. So you see our planner up in the upper left hand corner. His job is to come up with the overall plan. We basically tell it who we're looking for, what kind of events we're looking for. I like to use my Brassfields and my Cunninghams as examples. We're looking to research the birth of Thomas Cunningham, and we give it some information that we think he was born in New England. He may have been born in Northern Ireland. So we hand that information over to the planner. The planner takes a quick look at the internet, sees what's available out there as far as records, taking into account record loss and record availability, digitized records, stuff like that. Creates a plan. Then that is handed over to the manager. The manager walks through each step, expands the step into something that the searcher can go and find. The searcher hits the internet, pulls the information down, analyzes it, hands it back to the reviewer, and the reviewer, their job is to correlate that and compare that to the information we already have. Throw away duplicate information, analyze information that isn't useful and throw it away, and then keep what's actually useful. And we continue that loop for about 15 to 20 minutes until we've met the goal of the research. All that information is then analyzed, summarized, and returned back to you, the researcher. I'll probably pop this up a little once again later when I actually show you that functionality, but I kind of wanted to try to make Agentic AI real for those folks who may not have seen a diagram showing how the agents actually work. All right, this is our dashboard. Those of you who've seen this demonstration before or looked at some of our videos will recognize this. This is the starting page of the application. It has, as you can see, recent projects. These are the projects that I've been working on recently. Anytime you visit a project and do something with it, it'll show up on the recent projects. It'll show you the most recent 5 projects, and it'll cycle through them as you work on them. We have our recent individuals. These are the individuals that you've worked on recently. And again, it shows you the most recent 5 that you've worked on, and that automatically maintains and manages itself while you're doing your work. And we have recent events. And because events can get significant, we have 5 we showed the 10 of them here. But also, we only show you the events that you've worked on, because if we showed you every event you looked at, it would get very confusing, or it would just be everybody. So you see my Ruben Brassfield at the top. If I click through all the events that are on his timeline, the first 4 of these would be Ruben. That's not really useful. So the recent events are the ones that you've actually done work on, the ones you've actually modified. You also notice that we have these little dots indicating that the AI has recently updated this event. So since the last time I visited the Thomas Cunningham birth or the Moses Cunningham birth, the AI has actually updated those. And so those are indicating to me that I might want to go back and look at those. In this situation, I actually kicked off the smart web research and then I walked away and did something else and didn't go back and look at it. So it's telling me that it's actually completed that web research. The system will also periodically do a web research in the background for you. If you haven't visited the system in a while and done some work, it will go pick up one of your high priority events that has what it thinks is maybe some factual or cultural inconsistencies in it, and it'll do that research and send it to you. And those will appear this way also with these little red dots. All right, to get started, you can start a new project from here. Project is a group of people. Individuals can be members of more than one project, but it's a way for you to collect your thoughts and subdivide your research. As I said, individuals can be members of more than one project. The research you do, the relationship you establish, all of that transitions between projects, but it's just a way for you to be able to subdivide each of your sort of research projects into smaller groups. You'll notice here I've got this brass field one, and it has North Carolina, South Carolina, Mississippi, and Kentucky. That's because the brass fields start off in the UK. So I have another project called Brassfield UK, comma VA. So they come from the United Kingdom, and then they go to Virginia. So that's the first project. The second project is where they go after Virginia. There are people in both projects that are in common because some of the ones from Virginia go to North Carolina, and then they scatter to the winds. That's just the way I've opted to organize that. We can add an individual. So an individual can exist in the system without being a member of a project. Here we have the name or identifier. We don't actually have to have the person's name. That's really useful if they are deceased, and that way we can use their name in the smart web research. But if you're working on a super secret project and you don't need to use our smart web research to actually go find that person, you can actually just put line 5 from your Excel spreadsheet or something like that there. But for most of us, we'll put the name there, right? For most of us, it'll be Thomas Cunningham or Joseph Leonard Brassfield or something like that. Obviously, everyone has a birth. We do require a birth year. It can be estimated. So if I do 1900, you'll notice the birth year, I can mark it as estimated. I can also say that the place is unknown. So I may not know where they were born, so I can click the little question mark and mark it as unknown. You're not required to enter a death year, but if they're more than about 100 years old, the AI is going to, when the QA runs, it's going to flag that as someone who needs a death year. The other important reason to put a death year for someone who is deceased is we will only do the smart web research and send the person's name to our AI to search the internet for deceased individuals. We do not do web research on living individuals. So if you don't put a death year there, we'll go look at the internet and say, where can I find a birth certificate for somebody born in 1970? And we'll tell you in Ohio, right? And we'll tell you where to go to order that or what the legal restrictions are for that. But we will not go look for them if they are not deceased. And that's just a matter of privacy. And so this is a difference in the test environment. This is not in the subscriber version yet, but we've added a research goal. You notice a little robot head here? That's our indicator that this field is sent to the AI. So please don't put private information for living individuals in this field, but you can say, I need to find the birth location. That will get sent every time you do research with our AI. This will get sent as an additional goal. So it will color everything you do, whether you're looking for their birth, looking for their death, researching a wedding, anything like that. It'll send that as an additional goal. And again, that's not in the subscriber version, but it's in our test version. It will go out in our next release. I'll show you some more stuff on adding individuals here in a little bit. Let's dig into some of the research we've been doing. Let's go look at our Thomas Cunningham, and we'll just click right on his birth and go straight there. So there's a theory that Moses Cunningham, Thomas Cunningham's father. I don't know that I buy that yet, but I put it in the system for now, and we're going to do some research on it. So you see here, the goal for Moses is to determine his birth and death location and his connection to Thomas Cunningham. And I put son, maybe a little too specific. That might be coloring some of the work the AI is doing, but I want to see if it will use that. I've already done some research. The running general consensus is that Thomas was either born in Ulster or his father is definitely born in Ulster, given the time period and the Ulster migration to New England. And so I've gone ahead and guessed at Ulster. I could have easily said it was unknown, but for now I've got that as Ulster. So the AI has already run. So when I put Ulster in there and I saved this event, the AI decoded these and it basically said Ulster. So this is what Ulster would have been then. Today, it's Ulster, Northern Ireland. So this is where it was at the time that the event occurred. And then it would have told me that today it's known as Ulster, Northern Ireland. So you can put in as it's known then, as it's known now. And the AI, when it analyzes the places, will go and figure out, oh, at that time period, it actually fell under this jurisdiction. It was in this county. It was in this state. It was in this kingdom. And today it's over here in this other place. Very important when it comes to a lot of changing jurisdictions. The Brassfield example that I have in here, they come to Virginia when Virginia has very few counties and those counties start splitting. And for the most part, they didn't move, the counties split around them. But it's important to know that Essex County, when some of them came over, becomes Spotsylvania County later and a bunch of other counties. And so it's important to know where those records might be. Similarly, in Europe, as things shift around and empires come and go. One example I was working on with some folks, they actually were working on an Italian example. And it turns out it was the time period they were researching was right around the time that Italy was solidified into one entity. And the town they were looking at was formerly part of the Austrian Empire. And so the records were split depending on what kind of records they were. So it's very useful to know exactly what's going on there. Research, we have our insights. You can look at the analysis, gives you a little bit of information. It's all the stuff we've given it so far on this event, including the overall goal, wordsmithed into one nice little statement. You can copy that. Most of our dialogues have this little copy. And so we copy it to the clipboard and we can take it and paste it elsewhere. We also have a little bit of information about the place. So I literally ask, what would it be like to be born, in this case, 17th century in Ulster? And it tells me a little bit about what was going on there with the plantations and British settlement and things of that nature. So it's good to have that information so you understand how likely it is those records are going to exist. But also, if there's a major industry in the area, it can start to give you hints about guilds to look at, or in this case, a lot of it was farming. So we might be looking at markets and market towns to try to find newspaper articles or advertisements or legal wranglings that might happen around farming and agricultural goods. And then we say, okay, what records exist? So in this case, it tells us that there were records, but you know what? There's going to be some gaps, right? And so that way you know how hard roughly it's going to be to do this research. And maybe, especially if you have somebody who was born before good record keeping and maybe died after good record keeping, maybe we want to err on the side of the death records and obituaries and stuff like that to get us good information, right? So especially early 20th century, that was a tumultuous time with the two world wars and people moving around the world. And it might be better to switch over and look at a person's death because we would have potentially modern newspapers and modern obituaries. It gave us a lot of clues. So that's there to give you some clues on catastrophic record loss. So the first time I visit this tab, the insights will automatically generate. If I want to redo those at some point, I can click the little magic wand up here and it will rerun those insights. The next thing we would look at is the research. So similarly, when you come in here, this will be empty. Your insights will run automatically. And then once those are done, if you decide it's time to move on to the research, then you can come over here to the research and you can click the little icon here to run the research. If for some reason you think it's gone off the deep end, you can click the little red erase and it will remove all the research and you can start it over again. As you can see, this one's been run, right? So the Cunningham papers at the University of New Hampshire are very useful for this research. It's a combination of a DAR application that was done earlier in the 1900s and some other research and some other donations that people have made on the Cunningham family. Unfortunately, not a lot of it is digitized. So while this is a very useful reference, it would require me to contact them or go visit New Hampshire. Maybe I'll get to it someday. If you see these archives, these are the ones that we did where we basically said, hey, if I'm looking for somebody where these things happened in their life, where would I go? Obviously, it knew it was the Cunningham, so it took us to the Cunningham papers. It also tells us that the Public Records Office of Northern Ireland might be useful. And Thomas Cunningham, and since we already know that we're looking for somebody who is related to Thomas Cunningham, because I put Thomas Cunningham up here, and this is what I meant by, even though it's Moses Cunningham that we're researching, by adding Thomas by name to the research goal, I might have colored the AI a little bit. But Thomas Cunningham does have a find a grave entry. So we click on that. We'll go to Thomas Cunningham. He has the find a grave entry, nice pictures of his tombstone, of his spouses, and some of his children in the same area. But unfortunately, it doesn't mention his father in any way. So I'm probably going to take that connection to Thomas Cunningham, or at least these part out, and see if we can get some better results. The yellow, off yellow, gold colored here that says smart research, this came from our search of the internet. So in this case, there's a book that was written on Petersboro, New Hampshire. Thomas, not Moses, but Thomas Cunningham was present in that town at the time. He is one of the landholders who basically said, hey, this should be a town. It sometimes said he signed the town charter. He didn't actually sign it. He was illiterate, but he is one of the people cited that said, hey, I'm here and I'm staying here and I own land here. We should establish this as a town. So this is from archive.org. So the Internet Archive, it is an out of print book. And so you can click on it and you can go see the actual content of the book. You'll notice that we give you some details, which is the analysis of why this is important. So yeah, it's a secondary source, but it does have some information on who Thomas is. And it actually refers to him as the son of old Mose, which is a slang term, but also maybe that's a theory I'm working on. It might be a hint that some folks actually knew his father or he had mentioned his father. So don't know yet. Still working through that. This is my brick wall. So get to that at some point. Hopefully I can break through that brick wall. But we don't show you the content here. So you do have to click on the link to go to the holder of the content. That way the Internet Archive gets the traffic and you get to go see what the actual record looks like. If this were a state-held record, you could go to the actual archive. If it was held in one of the collections that one of the big genealogical sites holds, that we would send you there. We don't hold the records. We simply correlate, collate, and try to deconflict, or if we can't deconflict, we try to tell you that there's a conflict to be aware of. This happens in the Cunninghams, James and John repeat again and again. And so when I go look at some of the James Cunningham records, this analysis will give me 2 or 3 different Jameses, and it will warn me that there's a conflict there. All of this comes together in the summary. So everything gets a summary, and we summarize essentially what we found, and it has a 10, 11 sections to it. So the first one's just, hey, this is what I was looking for. And the next one's a nice executive summary. And you'll notice here the son of old Moses quoted again with its source citation. And then it goes through the rest of the information that it was able to find about. In this case, we're looking for Moses Cunningham, but there's obviously a lot of stuff mixed in around Thomas Cunningham, since he's the one that actually is mentioned in the books. And so it keeps going through. And this one really came up with one good source, and that is the book. And because it covers a lot of information about Thomas. This is one of those areas that we're still tuning, because we do want to have multiple sources. We do want to correlate and collate multiple sources. So we're still tuning this to get it closer to what we see in our subscriber version, which actually does give you a lot of sources, but not all of them are accessible and not all of them are verified. So where we've gone is towards sources that we can verify, sources that we can see, and where we can correlate and collate the details. And that whittled down the number of sources. And so now we're building back up to getting multiple sources and being able to collate and correlate them. And we'll do that before we push this over to the subscriber version. So another few weeks of tuning and tweaking of the AI and the agents. We hope to have those multiple sources collating and correlating in a better way. So we talk about what records we were able to find. Obviously, we found the history of the town of Petersboro, New Hampshire. We talk about which sources we did not look at. There could be many reasons for this. One of them could be time. So we do limit this to a 15 to 20-minute research session. That's AI time. Delays in searching, delays in processing, we don't include that. This is real AI processing your results and collating and correlating the results. But with that comes quite a bit of information that's useful. So here we have the next steps, right? So here's the priorities. So we need to go find the actual records, right? Examine the actual military records for Robert's Rangers. That's actually true. So Thomas did serve. On the home front, he was a little bit older, but he did serve. He spent several weeks serving as part of that company. And then some secondary things, right? So some other things we should go look at. And then gives you a summary of all of our discoveries, gives you any related individuals. So again, this was Moses Cunningham, and it found some references that indicate that Thomas Cunningham might be his son. That's, again, from that same source. Gives you a nice conclusion, tells you what the gaps are. So it goes through the genealogical proof standard here and tells you how well it thinks it's matched up against the genealogical proof standard. There's almost always going to be next steps that are going to fall short of the reasonably exhaustive. And that's because we do want you to touch the records. We want you to go see the records. And in some cases, we just can't get to them, right? They look like they exist. The indexes say they exist, but they're locked behind paywalls or they are in public archives that don't allow AI to search them. So we'll send you there. And that's what those next steps are about. So it'll almost always tell you that reasonably exhaustive is not quite met and encourage you to go touch the records, which is honestly the fun part, right? Getting to see the records. And then obviously we have our sources down here at the bottom. And again, this one ended up with essentially a single source. And unfortunately, that's where we're at with the Moses to Thomas Cunningham research. Some of the others, we have 5 to 10 sources on them, but that's where we are with this one. This is a very early one. Hopefully it'll blossom out into other sources as we get more details. And then obviously we always have our little disclaimer here at the bottom. This version with the agentic approach and the ability to look at the internet more closely is getting better at finding the sources. We do still occasionally find sources that are there that aren't the source that the AI says they are, but it's far better than I'd say 60% on the subscriber version. 60% of the links probably don't get you where they say they should go. It doesn't mean the record doesn't exist. Doesn't mean that if you go find that census page that you won't find the people on the census page, but there's a chance that link to the census page won't actually work. And that's one of the things we're solving with this new test version is to actually give you links that work. Or if we're unable to tell you that the link works, at least tell you, hey, this record looks like it exists, but we weren't able to actually verify it. So that's that part. Obviously, this is the person's timeline. In this case, it's Moses and the birth of his son, Thomas, and then his death. And you see a lot of unknowns here, right? So we don't really know quite that much about Moses. You'll notice that when I clicked on his death, this little spinner started. That means the AI is processing, and that is essentially kicking off this piece right here, right? So it's actually running this analysis. You'll see the first part here, but it says generating analysis or insights for Moses Cunningham. That would happen automatically the first time you click on the AI research tab, if it hasn't happened already. For each of the events, you can put your own research notes, and these are rich text. So you can do links. You can make them bold, italic, underlined, cross through them as you decide that the theory wasn't correct. Add links. So you can put an actual URL here in there, things like that. You can paste an image in, and it will save it, and it will keep it in the context. So when you need to keep some information about the research, you've got the little copy paste button there. You can copy that and you can paste it into this screen. And it keeps the formatting in this screen as well. You can attach documents. So as you find records, or if you already have some records, you can attach them here. One of the things that we're working on now that we've got the agentic approach is the ability for you to say, hey, I want this attachment to be part of the analysis that you're doing. So part of the agentic approach means that we have the ability to interrogate documents and pull content from those documents and analyze it. It's pretty simple for us to then add in the ability to do that to documents you've attached. That is not in the subscriber version right now. That is coming in an upcoming version. I put it off for quite a while, but now with the agentic approach and the intelligence that the agents are bringing, I think that is something we can do, with the idea being that you're still the arbitrator, right? This is still human in the loop. So you still get to look at that content and go, oh, you didn't do that right. Or that's not what I thought it said. And you obviously, it's your documents, so you can go back and verify it. Exciting things coming, not in the subscriber version yet, but should be in there either with the next release or shortly after that, since it's essentially just another data source for us at this point. Family tree. So as you would expect, you get a family tree. We do our family trees in a way that compresses them down. So you'll notice that this is Moses Cunningham at the top. He has an unknown partner. So this is a marriage. And so we model it that way as a marriage. And then we come down to Thomas Cunningham and his first wife, and Thomas Cunningham and his second wife. There is a child for Thomas and his first wife, but we don't have them in the system right now. I haven't documented them here. So if they did exist, they would appear underneath. Then we have Thomas and his second wife with 2 of their children married, James Cunningham to Sarah Ballantyne, William Cunningham to Dorothy Colby. And as you might expect, John and Sarah do have children, not in the system right now. William comes down here, but you'll notice down here, we'll just fast forward to James. James has a daughter, Margaret. labeled unmarried. Margaret is married. Again, her husband just isn't in the system right now, but that's how we model these as unmarried children. We'll simply list them. You can bring them up. You can click on their names and the flyout will fly up and it will show you their information. Similar up here, you can do Eliza Cunningham and Philip Greeley and their information will come out. So I'm just clicking on their names. I can drill into this. So I want to see this in more detail. And so I can click on that marriage union. And now it's brought up a more traditional family tree. And that's how we keep our family trees smaller. And that's how we let you drill into the family trees and similar functionality here, right? So Eliza Cunningham was the person we were looking at earlier. They are labeled with a star. So it's quick and easy to find them. But if I want to see Eliza Cunningham, I just click on their name. I want to see Philip again. And then this is obviously the sister that was labeled as unmarried sitting over here. To get out of this, you just click on the red X and we're out. And then we go back to the area we were in before where we left off. So wanted to, so about anywhere you see the eye, if you click on these individuals, it'll fly out. If you click on these eyes, it'll do the same. So this is Moses Cunningham. This came out. We can edit him. So we can change his, I'm going to get rid of the sun because I think that's coloring things. I might even want to get rid of the Thomas Cunningham. Actually, let's do that. Let's get rid of the Thomas Cunningham for now. Save that. That's saved his information. I can add an event to his life. So this is the events that we currently support. I can do that here. I can also scroll down here and I see his timeline and I can add an event to his timeline down here. If I want to view his timeline, I simply click on the view timeline. We're already on Moses Cunningham. If I wasn't on Moses Cunningham, it would switch to Moses Cunningham. So if I came down here and clicked on William Cunningham, it would show him. And then I could go down here and click on view timeline and it'll switch to William Cunningham's timeline, which would also give me the family tree in a view that is focused more on William Cunningham. But I want to go back here to Moses. I'm going to do some work on Moses. I can add relationships straight from here. I can add a spouse. I can add a child. I can add a sibling. I can add a parent and I can add other. So if I add a sibling here, it doesn't link to Moses's parents. So Moses currently doesn't have parents in the system. So if I was reading a family letter, or maybe I found a census or a tithing document or something like that, given that we're back in the 1600s, and it had somebody labeled as his brother, I could add him or his sister. I could add them as a sibling. We call that a sparse relationship. It'll show up as a sibling straight across from Moses, but it won't show up attached to his parents. Later, if I find his parents, I can add that person easily as a sibling there, and it'll still show up as his sibling. For example, we come down here to Margaret, and we see that Margaret has a full sibling, and we see that Margaret has parents. So their siblings show up here, but I could add another sibling. No reason to, because I have parents. I would just add them to the parents, but I could add a sparse sibling. It's really useful when you get to like great aunts and uncles and stuff like that. If you see something that says, I ran into cousin so-and in a family letter or a family Bible or in a story or something, it's nice to be able to just mark them as a cousin. You might not know exactly who they're related through yet. So you could simply add them as a cousin and they'll be in here as a sparse relationship. They'll show up similar to this as just a cousin off to the side with a line linking them. And then as you develop the family tree, you could meld them into their parents and who they're properly a cousin through. But we do support sparse relationships essentially for that purpose, so that as you're reading documentation or finding stuff, you don't have to keep a notepad or an Excel spreadsheet or something. You can simply put them in the system as a sparse relationship, linked off as a great second cousin or something like that, or just a cousin, because you might not say in the letter who they're a cousin through. All right, so in this case, it's Moses Cunningham. Like I said, I can add relationships. I can switch to his timeline here. Again, we're already there, but there's multiple places you could do it, so you don't necessarily have to scroll up and down all the time. I can edit events straight from here, so I can edit Moses's birth straight from here. I could add in his parents here if I knew who they were, that kind of thing. So I'm just going to close that out because I want to add Moses's spouse. I don't have any real documentation for this, but at one place it calls this person Mary Cunningham. So we're just going to call it Mary Cunningham because I want to show you just how quickly you can just add somebody. So Mary, yeah, I'm just going to put unknown as a little bit of a indicator that I don't really know their maiden name. Pull up my notes here. Stand by. I have notes on who they are. All right, we're going to do 1690. I don't know where birth year's estimated. I'm going to click this little question mark. I don't really know much about a death year. So I'm just going to click that question mark and it's going to do an estimate for me. And then I don't know the place, right? And so my research goal, I don't have one for this person yet. So I'll just click save. Mary Cunningham is selected. Moses Cunningham is my spouse. Mary Cunningham is spouse two. Spouse one, spouse two don't really impact the way the AI works. So you can just settle on male is spouse one or female is spouse one. It's up to you. You can just correlate that. If I already had a marriage listed for Moses, I would see that here. I would see a marriage and I could simply click on it. I don't have a marriage for Moses in his timeline. So I'm going to click create new. If one had already existed, you would have seen this same view with Moses listed as spouse one and spouse two not assigned. So I'm going to set Mary as spouse two. I'm going to say 1698. I don't know. So I'm just going to say unknown. So click save. And so now Moses has a spouse, Mary. However, Thomas doesn't yet have a mother because we just added it as a spouse. So in this case, I'm going to switch to Thomas. And so Thomas has two children. Thomas has two spouses. Thomas only has one parent at this point. So I'm going to add a parent to Thomas. And I'm going to come here and I'm going to say, give me Mary. There's Mary Cunningham. So Moses is assigned as the father. And we already know that Thomas was born in 1706 in Townsend, Middlesex County. This is in Massachusetts. So I'm going to click set. I'm going to click save. And now we have a family. So up here, we see that Moses is now married to Mary. There are 12 descendants through this tree. There's one child. And that is because Thomas is the child, but Thomas was married twice. So you see that Thomas appears underneath him twice, once for each of his marriages. So that's it. Mary now exists. I can pull her up. I can view her timeline. So we now moved over to Mary. And not much change in the family tree because Mary and Moses are at a similar level with similar level of detail, but I can go look at Mary's timeline. Mary was born in 1690. That was established when I created the individual. Died around 1730. Again, established when I created the individual and filled in her death date. Married Moses in 1698 and had Thomas in 1706. It's another feature we have, and I can click this little generate smart timeline. It's probably going to tell me there should be another child in here, right? And it may give me some other information based on the culture at the time. So we'll click that. I don't know if we may come back to it here in a minute, but hey, analysis is in progress. So that's been sent to the AI, and that has said that, and again, this is in production now. It's going to say for somebody born, actually, we don't know where she was born, but we do know that at some point somebody was involved with Townsend, Middlesex, New England. And so it's going to gather this information and it's basically going to say, hey, what would this person's life be like? And so it's going to give us some suggested events on this person's timeline that we can easily add. We can also ignore. There'll be another button once the AI is done. There'll be another button here that we can hide and show those suggested events. And we can simply add them in. Like I said, 8 years from marriage to the birth of their first child is a little bit long. Oh, and 8 years, I definitely did that math wrong, didn't I? Let's see. Let's adjust that a little bit. 1706. So let's make that 17. Definitely did that wrong. That would have flagged with the AI. All right, so 1705. So now it's going to probably be fine and it won't think anything of it, but it may also tell me, given 24 years between the birth of their last child and this person's death, that likely there's more children, so it would add those in as well. So I keep talking about how the AI will flag things. You'll notice that the border on this one is yellow. So let's click on that one. So this is a priority event. We support 4 colors of events. So red means that there's factually something wrong. When I had this marriage happening at 8 years old, even in 1690, that would have eventually, once the AI did the QA on this timeline, would have been flagged as incorrect at 8 years old. The yellow are culturally unusual, right? So in this case, birth location is based on a grave image, which lists colonial locations, no authoritative record found. So that is borderline, hey, maybe you should research this, to culturally incorrect. Yellow is typically something that you would have expected better records, you would have expected better information. And this happens in the Cunningham family. You would not have expected it to happen that way. So the Cunninghams later on have an 18 and 19-year-old getting married. So the male is 19 and the female is 18. And it came up with a yellow indicator because it said, hey, at this time period, a 19-year-old male would probably been at sea because this is colonial New England, seafaring. And it basically, once you are an able-bodied young man, you went to sea. And you typically didn't get married till you were in your mid 20s to mid 30s. And you married someone who was 5 to 10 years younger than you, or you married someone who was a few years older than you if you were coming back and marrying a widow. I had to go research that. I thought that was oddly specific, and that's actually the case. It was culturally unusual. That example was actually real. It was an acquisition of a shipping company. The 19-year-old was the first son of the Cunningham, of a branch of the Cunningham families. They were up and coming shipping family, and they had their own boats, and several of them held the title of captain. They'd married into other well-known New England founding families, and this 18 and 19-year-old getting married was their merger into the Nickerson family. The Nickersons are New England royalty. Essentially, it was an acquisition. That's well documented. It's real. But it was interesting that the AI picked that up. The other colors we have is we have blue. Blue is, hey, this is probably a good turning point in this person's life. There's likely to be a lot of documentation, marriages, modern deaths for someone who may have been born during the turn of the 1900s and stuff when records might have been damaged or destroyed, but died later. They often will get a blue because obviously we have modern newspapers and stuff if they died at a ripe old age. Green is just, yeah, this is probably someplace you can focus. In the future, you might find some good information here. Typical marriages and stuff like that, where they leave a pretty good paper trail and legal events and stuff like that. Sometimes we find references in court documents, obviously, and those become interesting things. The way you see that is you see them in the person's timeline here, like I said, with this yellow, or you see them in a project. And so with this project, you get action items. And that's one of the reasons you might want to collect things in a project is you get all the action items for all the people in the project. So here we have a death, and I can click on the little icon here that tells me why. So it's designated as England. It says, hey, you could probably do better than that. And then we also have this immigration, or we have this marriage. And let's see. Oh, yep. So he got married while he was an indentured servant. I believe the best documentation we have indicates that's true. But it's, hey, this is unusual. So again, it's yellow. So it's culturally unusual. But like I said, I believe the best we know from the documentation is that George. So this is George Brassfield. He's the one of the topics of Who Do You Think You Are for Reba McEntire, George Brassfield. I believe the best indication is this is true. But obviously, I'd want to go research that myself. And then medium priority. So high priority, red comes up as urgent with a stop sign. And then obviously marriage location is vague. You can probably do better than that. So basically it thinks that if you can resolve this, it could result in some good genealogical information. And then the greens which flow underneath this as well of, hey, these are typically fruitful places to look. Projects have individuals. You can add individuals directly here, or you can take individuals that are already in the system and add them here. You can remove individuals from the project. This does not remove them from the system. If you want to delete them from the system, you would go to individuals, you would search for them, and you would delete them from there if you want to delete them from the system completely. We have the family tree here is everybody who's in the project plus. So if there's good relationships, it can branch outside the project. I believe that Joseph Leonard Brassfield's children, Reuben and Joshua, are not in this project. They're in the North Carolina one that I showed you earlier. But because they're related to Joseph Leonard, who is in this project, they do show up here. Pardon me. Joseph Leonard, we're trying to prove whether he's actually a child of Thomas and Abigail and a sibling of these two individuals, which is why he's not currently attached. We attach him, I think that'll color the AI. So I'm working through that to see if we can actually prove that. And that's, again, one of the test cases that we have in the system. And then we show a timeline. So this is everybody's timeline that's in the project. And occasionally it branches outside the project if people are linked in. So for example, if I look at the one for my immediate family, not ancient ancestors, my mother's in that timeline. She's in the project, but her parents are not in the project. And so when I look at her birth, her parents do show up in the timeline and then they disappear out of the timeline because they're not part of the project, but they are obviously integral to her birth. So you can see that this could get a little bit convoluted. This is not a terribly complicated project. And if you get up to 50 or 60 people in a project and each of them have, let's say, at least 3 events, a birth, maybe a marriage, and a death, it could get pretty hairy and a lot of information. One, we've got the zoom in and zoom out as I just showed you, but we also have the ability to download this. So I can download it, as you see up here, open that up, take a look at it, mark it up, take it with me to an archive if I want to have a paper copy of something. And we do the same thing with the family tree. So the family tree can be downloaded as well. And this family tree does the same thing the other family tree does. So I can click on the individual's names and the flyout will show up. And I can quickly click here, go to their timeline, add relationships, all of that straight from here. So I can click the I and it will give me the flyout, quickly go straight to George's timeline if I want to. And then we have a map. And again, the map only exists in the project. It doesn't exist in the individual. And anywhere where we know the location, we have decoded it. So you'll notice that there's a lot of movement around Virginia. And then there's some movement that takes them to North Carolina. And then there's some movement that takes them to Kentucky. And so I can click on these and they bring up information. I can click on the eye and it will take me over to the timeline so I can see what each of these are. I can play the timeline. I can filter it by dates. So this is a slider that'll filter down the information. And there's a bunch of events in here that we don't have places on. And so they're at good old 0 because we don't have a latitude and longitude. They just haven't been updated yet. I can click on the eye here. We'll go see who this person is. There we go. David Brassfield. So I just don't have his information in the system if we know where he passed away. But obviously, this is one of those that's been flagged as a priority event. By the way, if you disagree with the priority, we do have this little X here, or if you think you resolved the issue, you go in here, you do some research, you update the information that you do know. Maybe it's just something that you forgot to add, or if it came in from a GEDCOM, maybe it didn't get imported. GEDCOM sometimes are hit or miss on what the source system will export. And so you can click here and we'll just remove that. The AI might bring it back. So when I leave here, the AI is gonna do its analysis on that timeline. It may come up with a different priority or it may bring it back. All right, so I've got a couple of minutes over on my time. I'll pause here because I did promise this would be a 45-minute demonstration. If you know somebody who would like to see what's coming in Genealogy Genie or see a demonstration, as you can see, it takes about 45 minutes and there are some features I still didn't show. So agentic web research out before the holidays. And then after the holiday season, we're looking to expose a lot of the data that we're gathering behind the scenes through the agentic research that isn't specific to the question you're asking, but is valuable to your research. We'll be adding that to the GUI after that in the run up to Roots Tech. More on that as things evolve. I'm sure we'll mention it again on our future demos, but a lot of the functionality that we're working on is really targeted at that, but we will be making it available to subscribers along the way. So once again, thank you for spending your Saturday afternoon with me.